Hello and welcome to this week's edition of LMP at Home Sofa Sundays. My name is Sophie Renshaw. I'm a violist and in the viola section at LMP, and I'm completely delighted to welcome Sally Beamish, composer, viola player and friend, to have a conversation with me today.
Because Sally and I were actually working in collaboration on a project 5 weeks ago, and you're going to hear the music of that today. We're going to play this duo that she wrote, and we were literally stopped in our tracks, were we not, Sally, by coronavirus?
Yes, the whole thing had to be shelved, and I was pretty heartbroken about that because it was a very exciting project, and in fact it was all around violas and the making of violas.
Could you tell us a little bit about how the project actually came into being?
Well, I was approached by an artist called Juliet Gutch, who makes mobiles that you hang up, not mobile phones. And she was basing an exhibition on the making of instruments, and she called it dovetailing. And it's about, I mean, a dovetail joint is a joint that's used in violin making. It's also a term that's used in the writing of music. You often talk about dovetailing lines so that they blend together, and it's about making, I suppose. And she asked me if I'd like to be involved in this, and I was very excited because I play on an instrument made by my daughter, Stephanie Irvin, and I suddenly realized that you play on a viola made by Stephanie's partner, Linus Andersson. Yeah. So I wondered whether I could arrange this violin duo for two violas, and it was particularly appropriate to use this violin duo because it was originally written about 15 years ago for an exhibition of violin making at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in Glasgow. And it was written to be played on a Stradivarius, and a copy of the Stradivarius, which was going to be made during the week before the performance. So when it was performed, one of the violins was still in the white, which means it hadn't been varnished. So it was sort of shiny white wood, and the Strad. So the two violins were heard together. And because they were going to be heard together, I wanted to be able to contrast the sounds as well as I could. And I thought the best way to do this would be to write a canon where you hear you hear the material twice, played first by the first instrument and then the second instrument joins. Yes. So I thought it would be fantastic to do this on our two instruments, which are both newly made. And we were going to film it, weren't we, in Glasgow, in Stephanie and Linus's workshop.
Well, I still hope we might.
Well, yeah. We're still intending to do that, and we're still absolutely determined that this project is going to go ahead. The exhibition was also cancelled because of the virus. But Juliet and her collaborator, Claire Dernelly, who's a filmmaker, are quite determined that it's going to go ahead. So this is, it's lovely to be able to keep working on the project and work towards it, and to have the opportunity to perform the piece. And it will actually be the first performance of this piece on two violas rather than two violins. It's been done on two cellos as well, but never on two violas.
I think Robert Irvine has done it, hasn't he, for on two cellos?
Yes, I arranged it for him to perform on two cellos, yes, I'd always sort of thought it would probably work on two violas, but it's so nice to have a real reason to do it, because it is about the making of instruments, and the fact that you and I are both playing on new instruments just makes it a kind of perfect reason to do it.
We should tell the LMP family that, in fact, Sally was principal viola in the London Mozart Players, I don't know how many years ago. And in fact, since Sally and I have a connection that goes back to my days in the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, where I was principal viola for 8 years, and Sally was also principal viola. I think my whole life, Sally, is just basically chasing your tail.
and now you're composing as well, which is amazing, because that's how you approached me, because you wanted to talk about that. Yes, so that was really how we sort of connected.
It is, and we've started a quintet together with Ruth Rogers and Sebastian Combetti and Kate Combetti, who's Sebastian's wife. We've started a 2-viola quintet called Ensemble 5 or V, because we loved playing these 2 instruments so much together and making music together. And it is very special that we're playing on instruments made by your daughter and your daughter's partner. So in fact, I met Linus quite independently of you up in Glasgow about 2 years ago, because I do some teaching up there, and I heard there was this young chap making fantastic instruments, and so I just went to have a play on some of his violas, and there was just this instrument there that was like the answer to all the dreams I've had of everything all my other instruments have missed. So they thought mine have been always quite projecting and quite, soprano-y, and his has got this bassy quality. And actually, my first instrument love was cello, and I really wanted to play the cello. And then my writing has actually taught me that I'm much more of a bass line ear and a harmony ear than a top line. I don't naturally gravitate to that as the premise for writing. Those aren't the things that come first. So I'm really, really enjoying playing on this very rich sounding viola, and it's very different to yours, isn't it?
Yes, well, that's so interesting, because I think I'm a very trebly person, and when I did a course of Dalcroze, the teacher pointed out that I was not hearing the lower lines. I was just always focusing on the top line, and the viola is very trebly, and Stephanie's viola, I think, is. I'm sure it's the instrument that I feel most at home with of any of the instruments I played. It just feels ideal for me. It's the right size. It makes the right sound. It's got a lovely warm sound at the top, but also a warm sound at the bottom, which is, not always the case with violas. Violas are kind of an imperfect art, aren't they? Because they're not perfectly proportioned. They're always a compromise of some sort, which is why violas have such different characters to each other.
To ask you in a second why your daughter actually did make you an instrument. Did you ask her to make one because you wanted to come back to playing, or did you come back to playing because she had an instrument and you loved it?
Well, the second, really, and I was quite astonished. It was so unexpected, because I stopped playing altogether when I was expecting Stephanie, and I sold the viola. I had bought a viola after my beautiful Italian viola was stolen, which was in London, and that was really what gave me the impetus to move to Scotland and think of myself as a composer. I then did buy a viola because I did a little bit of playing for a few years, and then I was doing less and less, and by the time I was expecting my third baby, which was Stephanie, I realised that I really wasn't playing at all, and we needed a new roof. So I sold the viola, and I thought, well, that's it. I drew a line under my playing, and I think it was a very difficult thing to do, and I think there was a lot of grief involved, and I remember finding it very difficult particularly to listen to the larger chamber music, because I used to play with the Raphael ensemble and did all that string sextet repertoire. And
in fact, you're a very old collaborator with our principal cello, Sebastian Combetti.
Yes, and I was a founder member of Divertimenti, which was a large string group. but I found I was avoiding listening to that music, and I think it was just too, in a way, too painful, because I think I did miss performing a lot. But,
the collaborative side of it, is that the collaborative side of it?
I think so. I don't think I even sort of worked out what it was that I was finding so difficult about listening to this music, but now I know what it was, and it was that I missed that collaboration and being in a room with musicians and being and working equally and sharing ideas, and but I never thought that would happen again. And I thought, well, I love composing, and I can't believe how lucky I am to be making my living from composing. This is a dream that I never thought would come true. So I really had drawn a line under my viola playing, and that was it. And then this baby grew up, and she was going off for her gap year, and her dad suggested that she went and worked with a friend of his who is Hoest Francois, who's a Dutch instrument maker in Amsterdam, and she went and did an apprenticeship with him. And she did ask me at the time the measurements of my Gabriele viola, which I gave her. And but I still didn't think that this would ever be something that I would play, because I couldn't play. I hadn't played for 20 years at all by that time. So she came back with this instrument, and the deal was that it had to be bought to pay for the apprenticeship and all the rest of it. So I bought it, and I lent it to various viola players for a couple of years. And then, just by a complete coincidence, I was asked to play in a festival in Switzerland where they always have a string playing composer in residence. Oh. And I kind of laughed, because I said, no, actually, I really don't play anymore. And then I started thinking, well, I've got this viola, maybe. And I had about 9 months, and I decided to go for it. And I nearly pulled out so many times because it felt so horrible trying to play again. But I did it, and then it sort of built from there, and now I'm playing a lot.
So how is playing kind of changing, if at all, your feelings about composing now?
Well, my viola parts are getting a lot easier.
Oh, by the way, everybody, check out the viola concerto. Whoa.
Well, it's one thing writing viola concertos, but if you're writing a viola part in a chamber piece, the player really isn't going to want to spend 3 months learning it. And I think that's what's really come home to me. It's just like...
What's so funny?
Being practical, it's horses for courses. It's not that the chamber players they could stand up and play a concerto, but they, on this occasion, they're playing chamber music, and they've got a whole program to learn, and they're not going to want to work out fingerings and practice endlessly to get some tricky corner right that I've given them without thinking. I remember a violinist in the SCO. There was a concerto I'd written, I think it was for 4 saxophones, but the fiddle parts were incredibly difficult in the orchestra. And one of the fiddle players just suddenly said, "Sally, you've forgotten what it's like to be a performer." And she was so right. It was just like, oh, they can do that. Because I've been so lucky working with amazing players. And they will do it, and they'll go off and they'll think, oh, okay. And they go off and then they work it out, and they perform brilliantly. And even as a string player, I had lost touch with how it really feels to perform that music. And I, there's no excuse for that, because I remember playing in Lontano and the London Sinfonietta when I was in my 20s, and practically weeping when I opened the next brown envelope with boulets or whatever in it, thinking, oh no, there goes my Christmas or whatever. I should be much more aware. And I am now, and I never know when I'm going to get caught out now, because I might end up playing the thing myself. So
there is a pleasure in, for me, works like the Berg Lyric Suite for quartet and Verkehrsnacht are 2 works that stand out for me as having been massive learns, very challenging to play. but so rewarding. But the trouble is nowadays is time and how stretched every performer is, as you say, for actually finding time to, you generally kind of get to do that if you're in a festival and you've got a week to prepare one piece or two pieces. But in the general run of things, it's very, very hard. But what I love about your writing, Sally, is particularly recently, because you've been more folk influenced, haven't you, in your writing since you left Scotland? Yeah. And I think there's a tremendously telling quality about it without it being complicated. I mean, that's what I love about folk music. The simplest air can be absolutely go straight to your heart. Music doesn't, and I had years in Ensemble Moderne where everything was just, incredibly complex. And sometimes you wondered at the end of the day, was it worth it? But, I'm sure that we appreciate people like to hear things that are just also, they don't have to be hard to listen to.
I think my music is getting simpler as I sort of let go of all. I think when you're sort of young and you're wanting to, and in the 70s and 80s there was a huge sort of complexity thing going on, and you felt you might almost be laughed at if you didn't, if you were tonal even, or and actually all my music is tonal. And that wasn't okay in the 80s. Right. So, it's quite interesting that now I can relax. Yeah. And, but I mean, talking about practicality, someone like Benjamin Britten was always practical. So he continues to be performed by the groups that he wrote the music for. So he knew how to write for amateurs. He knew how to write for people who weren't going to have very much rehearsal. All his instrumental writing is idiomatic and rewarding to play. And I mean, you could look at a composer like Tippett, for instance. And I remember when I was a freelance player, the Tippett's string music was done all the time.
Yes.
Because everyone had learnt it and they knew it. But now, if you put the little music for strings in front of an orchestra with one rehearsal, no way. I mean, it's just so difficult. Mm-hmm. And because it's slightly slipped away from the repertoire, it's hard for it to be revived because it's so much work, and it's fantastic music. Mm-hmm. But I think it less connected to the performance than Britain, for instance.
That's really interesting, because I must admit, over the last few years, I have wondered, where's Tippett gone out of programmes? You just do it, but it is fantastic to play. I mean, it's elated music in a way, isn't it? And very dancey, a lot of it, but it's hard to read. You mean it's just complicated to put together?
You can't sight read it, and I mean, I just got to know all those pieces. When I was a freelancer, and everyone knew them because they were being programmed. So it's a vicious circle, really. As they got done less, there were more people coming out of college and wide-eyed being put in front of Tippett and not knowing it, and then it becomes less practical.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of things, and we've kind of come back to viola writing, which is great because we're going to hear your duo in a few minutes. What I like about your duo is that although you've written almost identical lines, in a way they are identical, but in fact you can play around with the difference in timbres and character very much within that, so they don't have to be imitating and trying to sound the same in a way. Musically they have to relate, but it doesn't take away from the music, that I think that the two sounds are very different. Is there anything else you want to say about the piece?
Well, the piece is influenced by two things. One is Baroque writing, so it's in a Baroque form. It's a prelude and canon. Even the prelude is kind of in canon as well. So the two instruments are playing the same music, as you said. And the canon it's very much, I mean, the bow stroke and everything is very much influenced by Baroque, by Bach and Baroque style. But I've realized over the years that more and more that folk fiddle playing is so close to Baroque playing. I mean, for a start, you don't tend to leave the string. You don't tend to take your bow off the string very much. There are ways of creating sounds just by using the bow with not so much not so much vibrato. So it has that in common. And the other thing is ornamentation. And in this piece, I've used a lot of ornamentation, which I think is very much influenced by Scottish music, by pibroch, the bagpipe variation form, which has more and more intricate ornamentation, by drones, again, bagpipes, and very, very, very simple shapes being embellished with improvisatory ornamentation.
Well, this is another connection between us, Sally, because my group Hirondelle is made of Baroque players and folk musicians who've come together, and it was very, very influenced by the Alehouse Sessions, who are a Danish, I think, or Swedish Baroque group that has taken folk music, and the Danish String Quartet. They were all big influences on how I've begun to write, because they've taken the whole idea of extemporization in Baroque music and brought it into, we can bring it into any folk tune, and my violinist is very good at that, and I'm trying to experiment with writing, leaving open places now for us to improvise over drones or whatever in the music. So we get to have a little go at creating in the moment something completely new and all that sort of thing, which I think brings you closer back to being the creator of composer as well as the performer. And I think that distinction is artificial and has been created by our training, actually, and the way that the profession has kind of decided to split off all these different worlds, when in fact that's very artificial in my way of hearing it all.
And do you find that you're getting more relaxed about improvising?
Yeah, I mean, I've done bits through the years with different groups anyway. The one bit of improvising I have no idea about is jazz, the whole idiom, and I can't write it. I mean, I don't know about chord substitutions, any of that, forget it. But within the modal area and rhythms and things, I'm quite happy, yeah. Because I think you relate, you start to, I don't know, you trust your voice more and more, and you are relating what you're doing to the context all the time. I mean, my arranging is just basically my way of saying to somebody, I love your song, and this is my musical response to it. And anyone can do that, really. Just having the will to do it, really.
Yeah, it's getting rid of that voice that's constantly saying, is this okay? Am I allowed to do this? And once you've got rid of that and you sort of think, well, yes, I am. I want to create something here, and this is what's in my head, and this is what I'm creating, and that's completely more than okay.
There's another Scottish friend, actually, Mary Campbell, who's a wonderful writer and viola player, has set a challenge for she and I to take a whole day, set aside a whole day and write 20 songs in a day.
Deadlines are brilliant. There's nothing like a deadline to get you going.
Anyway, well, I hope that everybody really enjoys Sally's duo, which is a joy to play, and it's fantastic to know you, Sally.
And it's a joy to work with you. It's just been such a special kind of discovery of a kindred spirit.
So let's hope this is very much enjoyed, this performance. Thank you. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.